Two people wake up at the same time, work in the same profession, live in the same city. One prospers, attracts connections that expand their life, and seems to move toward ever wider horizons. The other stumbles over the same obstacles, repeats the same mismatches, and feels as if the world were a hostile territory. The external circumstances are identical, but the realities each one inhabits are opposite. For centuries, we tried to explain contrasts like this by attributing them to fate, luck, or invisible debts from other existences. But what if it were none of that? What if the root of this enigma lay not in chance nor in hidden forces, but in something silent and inevitable that acts at every moment? The key lies in a principle that never fails, never forgets, and never makes mistakes. A principle that returns to every human being the very image they sustain within themselves. This principle is not moral. It is not fair nor unfair. It only shows without embellishment what we carry as intimate truth. We call this phenomenon the mirror principle. Life, like a great reflection, does not respond to what we superficially wish for, but to what we deeply believe ourselves to be. It does not return the request of the mouth, but the portrait of consciousness. And in the face of this revelation, the question that echoes is inevitable. Are the limits you see in your life truly from the world, or merely reflections of an identity you have learned to uphold? The mirror of reality never lies. It only repeats. The difference lies in how you choose to look at yourself. If the mirror principle is inescapable, the first impact it causes is the realization that nothing we live outside of us is isolated from what pulses within. Life is not a neutral stage where events arise randomly. It is a field of response. Every gesture, every thought, and every belief form the invisible frame that projects into situations, people, and events. What we call external problems are in fact echoes of internal states. A relationship that always repeats in mismatches is not merely the result of bad luck in meeting the wrong people. It is rather the consequence of a belief pattern about one's own worth or about what is possible to experience in love. Likewise, persistent financial difficulties are not born solely from the economy or lack of opportunities, but from a direct reflection of how the mind interprets and feels its place in the flow of abundance. This is the hardest part to accept. The mirror creates nothing on its own. It only returns. Trying to change the reflection without touching the source is like yelling at the shadow, asking it to smile. We can paint the surface, temporarily disguise the signs, but as long as the projected image is the same, reality will return to the same place. Science also points to this connection. Research in neuroscience shows that cognitive filters, systems of beliefs and expectations, shape the way we perceive external stimuli. Two people exposed to the same scenario may interpret situations in completely different ways. And this interpretation creates not only a subjective view, but also triggers behaviors that confirm the initial belief. The one who believes they are rejected will tend to behave defensively, pushing others away and confirming the fear they carried. In the spiritual field, ancestral wisdom already spoke of the same principle, albeit in symbolic language. Ancient texts describe life as a river that reflects the posture of those who lean before it. It is not the river that changes color on its own. It is the vibration of the one who contemplates it that alters what is perceived. This is the essence of the mirror. It is impersonal yet deeply intimate. The most common mistake is insisting on fighting battles in the external scene, trying to force results without transforming the internal cause that sustains those results. It is like trying to correct a distorted image by hitting the glass of the mirror, without realizing that the deformity lies in the posture of the body that the mirror merely returns. That is why so many attempts at change fail, and so many New Year's resolutions fade within the first weeks, because they were made against the reflection, not at the source. Reality does not respond to the speech we repeat, but to the vibrational pattern we carry. Someone may affirm daily that they believe in prosperity, but if within they maintain the conviction that they are not worthy, the reflection the mirror will return is scarcity. The contradiction is not outside, but at the core that projects. And here arises a transformative point. Realizing that reality is a reflection is not a cause for guilt, but for power. If everything that appears outside us is a return of what we cultivate inside, then every experience becomes a coded message. It is not the world trying to punish us, but life itself signaling which frequency is active. External conflict becomes a map of internal belief. This understanding opens space for real change. The question ceases to be, how do I make the world change? And becomes, which version of me is being reflected now? This shift in perspective is the beginning of freedom, because if the reflection does not depend on luck or destiny, but on what we project, then the key is always in our hands. The mirror principle admits no shortcuts. It does not bend to superficial desire, nor is it moved by emotional pleas. It responds only to what is consistently sustained within. Therefore, recognizing life's unpleasant reflections should not be seen as failure, but as the clear revelation of where the image needs to be adjusted. And it is at this point that many realize that behind every recurring obstacle, there is not an external enemy, but a faithful reflection of the identity that has been fed over the years. The good news is that this reflection is not an eternal sentence. The image can be transformed, and with it, the entire scenario that life returns. Understanding that reality is a reflection already causes a first shift, but something more radical remains to be faced. This mirror never fails. It knows no exceptions, makes no allowances, and accepts no justifications. Its nature is absolute fidelity to the frequency we emit. This is the immutable law of the mirror. Contrary to what many think, the reflection does not evaluate whether a belief is beneficial or destructive. It does not ask whether you deserve to reap what you project. It only returns. That is why both joy and fear find confirmation in the external scenario. Whoever believes the world is always at war will find proof of it every day. Whoever sustains the intimate conviction that life supports them will begin to notice signs of that support in small gestures, coincidences, and unexpected encounters. This impersonal functioning can be compared to gravity. No one argues with it, no one tries to convince it to change. One simply recognizes its existence and learns to move within it. The mirror of reality is of that order. It is not a force that is moved by pleas, but a field that returns exactly what it finds in us. Quantum physics already points to something similar when it states that the observer interferes with the phenomenon observed, not because there is some subjective magic, but because every observation is impregnated with expectation, and that expectation collapses possibilities toward a specific result. Consciousness acts as a filter, determining which among infinite possible realities become tangible. The mirror of life works in an analogous way. It only confirms the frequency we sustain, as if it were a holographic screen that translates the invisible language of thought and emotion. This neutrality can be perceived in two opposite ways. For some, it seems like a prison. After all, if everything I see reflects my beliefs, am I condemned to repeat patterns I have carried since childhood? For others, it is a call to freedom. If life only replicates the image I project, I can consciously choose the identity I wish to radiate. The same principle that seems like a sentence can become the greatest tool of creation. The drama begins when someone insists on fighting the reflection without changing the image. It is like trying to manipulate the waves of the sea with one's hands without altering the moon that governs the tides. The effort accumulates, frustration grows, and the person concludes that nothing works. But the mirror was never wrong. It only faithfully returned the prevailing vibration. Think of an artist painting with invisible paints. Every emotion is a color, every thought a stroke. The picture only reveals itself before the mirror, but it cannot show anything beyond what has already been drawn. This metaphor reveals the precision of the law. Nothing can appear outside us that is not being nourished within. Life does not add brushstrokes on its own. And here lies the true turning point. Until now, perhaps you believed that the world happens to you. But what if the world only responds to you? What if there are no neutral events, but rather unceasing reflections of what your consciousness sustains as real? This change of question may be unsettling at first, but it is also the point of greatest empowerment. The mirror is not moralistic. It neither punishes nor rewards, it only translates frequencies. If someone internally cultivates the fear of scarcity, life does not punish that person with difficulties. It only returns a scenario that confirms the original fear. And if someone maintains the trust that they will be cared for, life does not reward them with opportunities. It only mirrors that conviction in external events. Everything is response, not judgment. This impartiality is disconcerting because it removes from the game the idea that external forces decide for us. Power returns to the interior, where frequency is chosen and sustained. This means that any reality can be reshaped from internal adjustment. The process requires consistency, because the mirror only returns what is truly stabilized in the field of consciousness. It is not enough to wish for a few minutes. It is necessary to embody the new identity until it becomes natural. Perceiving this law is like discovering that the universe does not speak the language of words, but the language of vibration. And unlike a common language, it is impossible to lie in this language. We can say that we believe in abundance, but if our body vibrates fear and resistance, the mirror will reflect exactly that. It is impossible to deceive it, because it does not respond to speech, it responds to frequency. Seen this way, the mirror ceases to be an enemy, it becomes a guide. Every uncomfortable situation becomes a sign of which belief is still active. Every unexpected joy shows that a new identity has begun to consolidate. The mirror is a silent master, always returning the lesson with precision. And perhaps this is the greatest revelation. It is not the world that lies, but our own narrative about it. External reality never cheats. What we see is always the truest portrait of who we are being now. Recognizing that the mirror of reality is infallible raises an inevitable question: how to change the image we project? If the reflection does not judge, but only returns, then all the power lies in the identity we choose to sustain. It is at this point that the secrets practiced by the masters of the mirror emerge, those who understood that reality does not need to be a vicious circle, but can become an intentional work. The first of these secrets is conscious projection. Most people live conditioned by circumstances already in place, shaping their own identity from what the mirror shows. If the reflection reveals failure, the person declares themselves a failure. If it shows scarcity, they assume the identity of someone limited. If it presents rejection, they begin to believe they are unworthy of love. This cycle is hypnotic, for it reinforces the reflection and turns it into certainty. But the masters reversed this logic. Instead of taking reality as the basis to define who they are, they chose who they wished to be and projected that image regardless of the current reflection. It is like an actor who decides to play a role even before stepping on stage. He puts on the costume, adopts the posture, rehearses the lines until the new identity ceases to be mere performance and becomes a second skin. The difference is that in this case, the stage is life itself, and the costume is the set of beliefs and vibrations we sustain. Conscious projection is this deliberate act of assuming the identity of the version of yourself that already inhabits the desired future, bringing it into the present as if it were natural. But it is not enough to formulate positive phrases or repeat affirmations disconnected from emotion. What changes the reflection is the integral incorporation of the new identity. Body, mind, and emotion aligned with the version you chose to sustain. That is why the practice does not begin in the external world, but in the silent writing of one's own consciousness. A powerful technique is to record in detail who you need to become to live the reality you desire. It is not just about listing achievements, but about describing behaviors, inner attitudes, ways of reacting. Who are you in the face of success? How do you position yourself in relationships? What do you feel about yourself? By putting this identity on paper, the process gains shape. But the true leap occurs when you begin to live these characteristics now, not in a distant future. It is not waiting for the mirror to change to then feel confident. It is feeling confidence now, even if the reflection does not confirm it. It is not waiting for abundance to appear to then feel prosperous. It is living the posture of prosperity in the present, even with unpaid bills on the table. This is the hardest test, because the mirror usually challenges those who dare to project a new image. It initially returns the old patterns as if asking, do you really believe in what you sustain, or do you just wish it were true? It is at this moment that many give up, returning to the old identity. But those who persist consistently embodying the new frequency, perceive an inevitable change. The reflection begins to yield. Reality, once rigid, bends before the new identity. Conscious projection is not a fantasy, but an inner technology. Each emotion sustained becomes a signal sent to the invisible field that shapes experiences. By repeating this signal intentionally, reality learns to respond according to the new code. The practice is less about creating something external and more about recognizing that the source is always in who you are in the now. And here lies the beauty of the process. It is not necessary for the reflection to change immediately for you to live the new identity. On the contrary, the reflection is the last part to adjust. The beginning of transformation happens within, in the way you decide to position yourself before yourself and the world. If you have come this far, perhaps you have already felt the call to begin this exercise. Write down who you need to become to live the life you desire. Read these words aloud and feel them as a presence. More than a description, treat this record as a silent contract with the version of yourself that already exists in the field of possibilities. And now, I want to invite you to take a step further. If this idea made sense to you, like this video and write in the comments, "I choose to consciously project who I want to be." Let this gesture be not only an interaction, but the first visible reflection of the identity you decided to sustain. In the previous stage, we saw how conscious projection inaugurates a new relationship with the mirror of reality. But assuming this identity is only the first step, the second secret of the Masters of the Mirror reveals something less glamorous, but absolutely essential: the patience of the gardener. Those who decide to cultivate a new identity often face an uncomfortable interval between the seed planted within and the harvest that appears on the outside. It is in this space that many give up, convinced that nothing has changed. The reflection still insists on showing the old patterns, as if mocking the attempt at transformation. But the patience of the gardener is the wisdom of sustaining the new posture even in the face of the absence of immediate signs. A farmer does not dig up the soil every day to check if the root is growing. He trusts in the invisible process working beneath the earth. The same occurs with identity. Once projected, it needs time to consolidate in vibration until the mirror has no choice but to reflect this new image. Impatience is the quickest way to cancel the process because it reinforces the old belief that nothing happens. This interval can be disconcerting because we live in a culture that values instant results. But life does not bow to immediacy. The mirror demands consistency. Every day you sustain the new identity, even without external proof, is like silently watering the plant that has not yet broken through the soil. It is at this point that faithfulness to the new version becomes the true proof of power. The challenge is not to believe for a few minutes, but to maintain the posture even when everything around seems to deny the change. This is the moment when the mirror tests the solidity of your choice. It asks in silence, are you living this identity because you really incorporated it, or just to obtain quick results? The answer is not in words, but in the constancy of your vibration. This faithfulness is the turning point, because the moment the new identity stabilizes within you, the external reality inevitably begins to yield. It is not about luck or coincidence, but about resonance. The mirror has no freedom to invent something outside the frequency you sustain. When your new identity becomes natural, the reflection cannot resist. In this process, time is not the enemy, but the ally. It allows the new version to mature, for the old patterns to lose strength, and for body, mind, and emotion to align organically. Forcing immediate results is like harvesting green fruit. It may generate some momentary satisfaction, but it does not sustain fullness. The patience of the gardener ensures that when the reflection changes, it will be solid and lasting. Spiritual traditions have always intuited this principle. Masters of different cultures spoke of the importance of remaining on the path even without seeing results. The secret was not to wait passively, but to live as if the fruit were already guaranteed. This posture is not empty expectation, but active trust. It is the awareness that in the invisible plane, transformation has already begun, even if the mirror still shows traces of the old face. We can compare this process to the sunset. The horizon is still lit, but night has already begun its march. Darkness has not yet fully shown itself, but it is inevitable that it will come. In the same way, once the new identity has been chosen and sustained, the old reflection may still shine for some time, but its extinction is only a matter of consistency. The patience of the gardener does not mean resignation. It means living the new identity with serenity, without anxiety for immediate proof. Each day lived in this state is a silent reaffirmation that the reflection is already in motion. And the more you insist on sustaining this posture, the more inevitable becomes the moment when the mirror returns what you have cultivated. This second secret may be the hardest because it requires going against the haste of the ego, but it is also what separates those who flirt with change from those who truly live it. The reflection is not conquered by anxiety, but by faithfulness. And it is precisely this faithfulness that paves the way for the next secrets, where directed focus and the breaking of the reverse cycle become decisive tools. Because once the gardener trusts in time, he also learns to protect the garden against distractions that could choke the emerging sprout. The patience of the gardener ensures that the new identity has time to consolidate. But patience, by itself, is not enough. It is also necessary to know how to direct the gaze, because the mirror records precisely that on which the mind insists on resting. This is the third secret: directed focus. Most people believe that their emotions are the key to manifestation, but the mirror does not respond exactly to fleeting moods. It reflects the quality of the thoughts we repeat, the content that repeats until it forms a stable field. If a person spends the day thinking, "I hate being without money," the mirror does not recognize the indignation as energy for change. It only confirms the central idea, being without money. The reflection does not record the emotion, but the core of the thought. That is why focusing on what is lacking reinforces absence even more. A gaze fixed on the problem amplifies the problem. Those who live repeating "I don't want to suffer anymore" keep suffering alive in the vibrational field, because attention is glued to the pain. The mirror does not understand negations, it only returns the sustained content. The mind, in this process, can be compared to a lens. Whatever it chooses to magnify, life returns on a larger scale. A lens directed at scarcity makes reality magnify signs of lack. A lens directed at trust allows coincidences, support, and opportunities to arise with greater clarity. Focus, therefore, is not just attention, it is creation. But there is still a fourth secret, capable of freeing those who find themselves trapped in endless cycles. It is about breaking the reverse cycle. This cycle happens when someone looks at the current reality and validates it as definitive. The person wants to change, but at the same time continues feeding the narrative. This is how things are. The mirror, obedient, continues returning the same landscape. Breaking the reverse cycle means stopping taking the current reflection as evidence of the truth. What you see now is only the photograph of past beliefs. It is not a sentence, it is an echo. The mistake lies in treating the echo as prophecy. The master of the mirror learns to look at the present reality without being hypnotized by it. He knows that the reflection is only a delay, and that the current frequency sooner or later will become the new landscape. This process requires discipline. It is easy to be captured by external signs, especially when they seem to repeat old pains. But the act of breaking the cycle is precisely that of not yielding to this validation. It is sustaining the new identity as if the reflection had already adjusted. It is acting as if the desired future were as real as the recorded past. A powerful practice along this path is celebrating small signs. The mirror, before changing entirely, usually gives discreet hints: an unexpected conversation, a symbolic coincidence, a feeling of lightness that did not exist before. Those who ignore these signs remain trapped in frustration. But those who celebrate them, even if minimal, strengthen the new frequency. Celebration is not naivety but fuel. It is proof that the garden has already begun to sprout. This posture does not mean denying the current reality, but refusing to treat it as definitive. It is like a sculptor who looks at a block of stone and already sees the form that has not yet been revealed. He does not argue with the stone, he does not lament that it does not yet show what it carries. He only continues sculpting because he knows that the final image is contained there. The present reflection is only the raw block. The new identity is the form that will be revealed. Breaking the reverse cycle also requires courage, because by removing the authority of the current reality, you must assume full responsibility for the reflection you wish to create. There is no longer room to declare yourself a victim of circumstances. Directed focus and the refusal to validate the old reflection transform life into conscious work, and it is at this point that the journey with the mirror reaches its maximum intensity. You discover that you are not just someone reacting to what you see, but the very architect who chooses which image to sustain, until the reflection has no alternative but to yield. The mirror never lies, but also never resists. It only responds. Upon reaching this point, a new horizon begins to open. Because understanding focus and the breaking of the reverse cycle not only alters external circumstances, it alters the perception of who you are in the face of life. And it is this perception that naturally leads to the final moment. The understanding that you have always been an artist before the mirror, but now you can consciously paint the reflections you wish to inhabit. After understanding focus and the breaking of the reverse cycle, it becomes impossible to look at life in the same way. What once seemed like chance or punishment reveals itself as the exact reflection of a sustained identity. The mirror never lied, it only returned. The difference is that now you know. You no longer need to live as a hostage of the reflection. You can be the author of the image you wish to see projected. This principle does not ask for blind belief. It asks for practice. Each thought nurtured, each emotion cultivated, and each posture assumed are brushstrokes on the canvas that reality will later reflect. The world is not built on the outside. It is revealed from within. You can choose to be a victim of circumstances or a conscious architect of your own experience. And the question that remains is not about the mirror, but about you. What reflection do you wish to sustain from now on? The answer does not need to be shouted nor announced. It only needs to be lived. Life will respond without delay, because it always responds. If you have come this far, I want to invite you to leave your mark. Write in the comments, "I choose to be the architect of my reality." That way, I will know that you have traveled this journey to the end. And if this content touched something within you, subscribe to the channel. There is much more to discover, and each new video can be yet another reflection of the identity you are choosing to live.